Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. Our next guest is a lawyer, a member of the ruling All Progressives Congress, spokesman of the Buhari Presidential Campaign Organization, and a senior advocate of Nigeria, SAN. Now, he's here to talk to us about why Nigerians should give President Buhari a second chance in 2019. And now joining us from our Abuja studio is Festus Keyamo. Festus, welcome to the morning show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, you are welcome. Good to have you. Thank you for honoring our invitation. Let me start from the beginning, from the main issue. A lot of people have been complaining that in the last 3.5 years, President Buhari has been given a great opportunity to achieve his ambition of leading Nigeria a second time, but that he's not been able to deliver on his promises. That under his watch, a lot has gone wrong and the future looks bleak. Why do you think he deserves a second term as his spokesman?
Well, you know, that question is very open-ended because I would love to take on very specific issues. When you say a president has not delivered on his promises, we can talk from morning till evening, and we will not cover all the areas we want to talk about. So it would actually be better if we concentrate on one issue at a time, because, you know, government is such a big business that we cannot cover all this. But let me just say this generally, that when you are campaigning for an office, just like, you know, you all do all over the world, you know, all candidates do all over the world, your promises are like projections, what you intend to do when you get to office. And in most cases, I must say that we must add what the Latin people called Satirus Peribus, or how they call it. I think
all things being equal.
I'm not pronouncing it well. In other words, it means all things being equal. All things being equal. And when you now get into office and all things are not equal, then you know too that you will now have to try and deliver on your promises actually based on the conditions you meet on the ground. Now, those promises may not be met 100%, but then what we'll now look at would be the circumstances under which you operate. You operated, well, that if you have left office, or the circumstance under which you are operating if you are still in office. You also look at perhaps the context in which you want to assess that the performance of that government. So I think we should look at the performance of this president in the context of what he met in office. For example, let me take one of them. You know, of course, that at the point of taking over government in 2015, the country was already in trouble. 24 states could not pay salaries at that point. Government was borrowing to pay salaries. Oil prices, you know, were crashing down all over the world. And that is our mainstay as an economy. It's our mainstay. Our foreign reserves, you know, was badly depleted. I mean, so these are the circumstances under which, you know, the president took off in 2015. And if you want to judge him in the name of God, you know, in fairness and in good conscience, we must look at his performance from this background.
Well, Festus, in 2014, Nigeria was the leading economy in Africa. Within 2 years, under the Buhari administration, we had gone into recession. You said that at the point he took over...
that is a lie.
Let me finish. Let me finish.
Let me just
no,
tell you
let me finish.
Let me tell you straight away.
I've not finished my sentence. Let me finish the question. Okay. By 2016, under his word, the country had gone into recession. Okay, the standard thing for spokespersons like you working for the Buhari administration is to say the previous administration caused all the problems. And Nigerians say, yes, that was why...
Don't preempt me. It's wrong to preempt me. It's wrong to preempt me.
No, I'm not preempting you. No, Festus.
Don't preempt me. You are asking the question. You are answering the question. Dr. Ruben,
Festus, hold on.
You know, the problem we are going to face is that you are answering the question at the same time. You say what we will say. Don't preempt me.
No, I'm not preempting you.
Ask your question, I will answer your question.
I'm trying to provide... No.
You are preempting me.
No, don't push. Don't push. Just listen to me. I'm giving you issues that you can respond to. And Nigerians say, look, we elected you so that you can move Nigeria forward and solve some of these problems that we, the voters, have identified. So at what point did certain things become not equal?
Let me answer you first of all to say that when you say we're the biggest economy in Africa in 2014, you must understand what the economists said, all the world-leading economists said at that time. The leading economy in Africa was just a big fat lie because it was only based on the increase in oil prices to an all-time high, and production was all-time high. It had absolutely nothing to do with government policies and programs. It had absolutely nothing to do with what the government did at that time. And all the leading economists said so. What they did was that it was not an all-inclusive growth. It was only growth in the oil sector that government did not contribute to. It was just high time, like I said, high prices in oil, and at the same time, full production at that time because of the checkmated militancy in the Niger Delta region. At the same time you are talking about, when you said it was the biggest economy in Africa, there was a World Bank report that said we were actually one of the poorest in the world, that in fact more than 100 million people were living in extreme poverty. So what we had before was just a clique, a few big boys living larger than life, and because they were the voices that were heard, okay, it appeared everything was okay because the big boys were eating, the few were eating. And the World Bank kept telling us that we had more than 100 million people living in extreme poverty even at that time. So it is not correct. I'll just correct you. It is not correct that all was well. Now, that same period you talked about, that you said Nigeria was the biggest economy in Africa, it was that same period your finance minister, because you served in that government, you know, the finance minister, Ugozo Okonjo-Iweala, was warning the world, was warning everybody that Nigeria was in trouble, the economy was in trouble, that we are headed for a recession. She kept saying it. I did not say it. Your own finance minister said so. I want to ask a very simple question. If it is true that the previous government left the biggest economy in Africa, why was it that the foreign reserves was fast depleting at the time they handed over power? I want an answer to that question.
Well,
why was
incidentally,
it
Festus, I'm the one conducting this interview.
Let me finish.
You.
I need to finish. Let me finish. At the time they handed over power, why was it that 24 states were owing salaries? They should answer that question. Why was it that they were borrowing? Biggest economy in Africa? I mean, that makes me laugh. Why were they borrowing to pay salaries at the time they handed over power? Why was it that the Naira was collapsing against the dollars at the time they handed over power? There has been no answers to these questions. So they're just telling the populace a big, fat lie. That is all they're saying. Now, let me take off, from what, the present government did. Because, like you said, people said we should not talk about the past, we should not blame the past. But then, it is the past that seeks to come back now. It is that same government that was booted out in 2015 that is seeking to return in 2019. So I want to say it here on this program that nobody is going to teach us how to run our campaign. Nobody. My opponent in a boxing match cannot be telling me where to punch him. It's not possible. The fact that my opponent in the boxing match is telling me not to punch him somewhere means that is where it hurts. We must keep reminding Nigerians as to where we are coming from. It is not an excuse for failure, I repeat. Referring to the past is not an excuse for failure. It is just to remind Nigerians that in the circumstance we find ourselves, we have made progress and we are moving somewhere. It is comparative analysis. When people criticize us, they do it on the basis of comparative analysis. Yes, when we want to respond, they say we should not respond on the basis of comparative analysis. It is wrong. And that is why we must keep referring to the past. Now, I will also tell you now that in spite of the fall in oil prices, in spite of tight budgetary provisions, do you know that the previous government, did not spend more than 10% in infrastructure. Despite the high oil prices, despite the highest revenue any government has ever earned in the history of Nigeria, they were spending less than 10% in infrastructure. With this government in place, with Buhari in place, what he did was to shift his focus from handouts, which was what was prevalent in the past. They were just giving handouts to people. He has shifted his focus to invest in critical infrastructure. Now, if you notice that the budget now, they are doing up to 30% in terms of capital projects. That has never been achieved in this country before. It has been recurrent expenditure, that has been gulping a larger part of our budget. But we have achieved up to 30% in capital expenditure. And that's why you had about 1.2 billion naira in the 2016 in actual releases for capital projects. And in 2017, you had 1.5 trillion actual releases for capital projects.
Festus Keyamo, let me ask you a more pointed question. You talked earlier on about salaries not being paid. Under the Buhari administration, salaries have also not been paid in many states. There is even a crisis over national minimum wage right now that the government has not been able to resolve. You talked about extreme poverty before 2015. In fact, the situation has worsened because Nigerians are still complaining. The international analysts, HSBC Securities, the Economic Intelligence Unit, the IMF, they're complaining about the inability of the administration to manage the fault lines within the Nigerian economy. So what has changed? And when I say what has changed, I take you back to the original question. Why should someone like me, for example, vote for President Buhari in 2019?
Now, you are running away from the fact I gave you. The World Bank report.
There's no fact you can give me that I don't know.
Google it. So everybody, no, I want everybody to Google it as we speak now. The World Bank report about extreme poverty in Nigeria in 2012 said more than 100 million people living not in poverty, in extreme poverty. Now, the World Poverty Clock puts it at 87 point something million. That is the fact. I'm talking about figures now. So I don't know how to reconcile these figures. Now, I'm not going to sit down here to say we have improved. But these are the figures I'm giving you. That in World Bank, I
know those figures. Tell me what has changed.
World Bank report.
No, don't worry. I know all of that. Tell me what has changed.
Very simple. What has changed? What has changed is simple. What has changed is very simple. What has changed is that at a time we were earning so much, we had so much money. People, more than 100 million people were living in extreme poverty. And the government could not invest in critical infrastructure. What has changed is that with very, very little earnings in oil, with very little earnings coming into government, government has been able to invest in critical social investment programs that targets the extreme poor, that targets the extreme weak, and that targets the vulnerable in society. With very, very little earnings, government has been able to release the Paris Club funds to states with specific instructions to pay salaries. Now, the fact that some rogue governors and some recalcitrant governors are not paying salaries is not the fault of the federal government, because the federal government, I'm sure you have seen the actual releases to states with specific instructions to pay salaries. At some point, the backlog of salaries came down across the country. The federal government was not concentrating on itself alone. It was also concentrating on the states. It did not say, well, it's a three-tier of government, we will concentrate on the federal workers, the states can take care of itself. And do not forget that this is the first time we are going through serious economic crisis like we have gone in the past before, that government did not retrench workers. In the past, Babangida at a point retrenched workers when we were going through economic crisis. They either downsized or right-sized. But government was able to keep workers at work without downsizing and right-sizing and during the economic crisis. So it is not correct to say that government has failed totally in the areas of workers' welfare. Of course, the issue of minimum wage, I stand with the workers. I will tell you that straight away. I will not shy away from the fact that it is a disgrace at the type of monies workers are receiving now. But of course, you know that the strike was not called off based on empty promises. There are solid, proposals on the table. And you know that what is actually delaying some of these things are the states, having to carry the states along for them to be able to pay the new minimum wage that's on the table. So it is to put it in proper context, there are of course very solid and concrete proposals in terms of workers' welfare and salaries that's on the table. It's not that the government has sat down and arms akimbo.
Well, there was a second leg to that question. I wanted you to tell me why I or any other person should vote for President Buhari again.
It's very simple. A president that has shown prudence, absolute prudence in managing very little resources, in managing, meager resources at a time of grave economic crisis, should be entrusted with power again, with the hope, of course, that revenues are going to go up. If you notice that for the first time in many years in history, we are earning so much now in non-oil exports. In the first 2 quarters, we earned 590-something billion in agricultural exports, in yam, in cocoa, in prawns and shrimps and all of that. We are exporting. Look at what is happening, the rice revolution that is happening. You will agree with me that with little resources, this president has concentrated so much in local production of rice. All the rice mills are back. And this was what governments in the past, with all the earnings in oil, could not achieve. Now the importation of rice has dropped, which is one of our major staple food in this country. And you know that with that comes, of course, the saving of foreign exchange. Our foreign exchange, we are saving them right now as a result of the drop in the importation of rice. You also know, too, that the president has also concentrated so much on fertilizer, the fertilizer issue, that all previous governments could not address. They kept importing fertilizer, they kept subsidizing the importation of fertilizer, and all kinds of things. What did this president do? Knowing that agriculture is one of our mainstay, he just went to Morocco and said, look, give us phosphate. The only thing we didn't have, we had all the other components of fertilizer. We didn't have phosphate. He said, can we have just phosphate so that we can produce fertilizer inside the country? And you know, of course, that even PDP government, like the Ebonyi state government, they have been ecstatic. They have been excited that the fertilizer blending plants in Ebonyi and other areas have come alive. More than 16 fertilizer blending plants that were comatose, they are now alive. They are providing jobs for people. We are not importing fertilizer again, and we are saving so much of our foreign exchange that we used to, import fertilizer. We now save them. Look at the level of prudence. The level of management of our resources is unrivaled in the history of this country. Trust this president with more resources. Trust him. You will see he will move mountains.
Festus Keyamo SAN. I'm having fun. I'm enjoying this conversation. And I imagine that I must have sounded the way you are sounding a few years ago when I was still in government. So I understand what your responsibility is, what your duty is.
We have known ourselves for nearly 30 years, Doctor. You remember?
So I know what the game is.
We know ourselves for nearly 30 years now. The only time, on a lighter note, the only time I did hear from you was when you were in government, that you refused to pick my calls, you refused to return my text. On a lighter
you are sure you called me?
That was the only time I did hear from you.
Anyway, let's open up.
Government, we started talking again.
Let's open up this conversation a little bit. Now, one of the concerns about your principal, the candidate you are selling to Nigerians, that he has been very selective in terms of the integrity, in terms of the war against corruption that you talk about. One of the major fallouts in this administration has been, one, commitment to the rule of law, and secondly, this certificate scandal that we seem to have all over the government, beginning with the president and other principal officers, and also the integrity of certain persons in the government. And people say, look, this puts a question mark on the major plank of the administration, which is the war against corruption. What's your take? And particularly the administration's commitment to the rule of law as opposed to national security, all that rhetoric over that issue.
Well, you have rolled two questions into one. You talked about the anti-corruption crusade. You also talked about the various scandals, some scandals that came out of government, and of course, the commitment to the rule of law. Let's take them one by one. Let me make it very clear to you, first of all, and to all Nigerians, that you will not find any single government all over the world where some kind of scandals will not come out of the government once in a while. Even in very advanced countries, you hear of prime ministers resigning in Britain at times, in the UK because of scandals. You hear of people resigning from government at times in the United States because of scandals. And so, I mean, let us be honest. If you are setting a narrative of a tone that the moment one or two scandals come from a government, the government has totally lost it, it is wrong. They will always come out. Now, what is the difference, Doctor? The difference is how the particular governments react to these scandals. Do they sacrifice the integrity of the state to protect individuals, or do they sacrifice these individuals when the scandals broke in order to protect the state? That is where the difference lies between one government and the other. And you will agree with me that the fact that the president has had to sacrifice close allies, the fact that he has had to sack them from government, shows that to the president, he is more interested in protecting the institutions of state. It means that the president, he doesn't care whose ox is God. That is the hallmark of a true leader. Now, you will say that we should not refer to the past, but we've had situations in the past before where people were seen to be spending monies belonging to the state on private jets, on buying yachts abroad, on buying all kinds of properties everywhere, and the scandals were everywhere. But they remain in government till the end of the government. Now, in this case, the president has had to sacrifice his secretary to government. He's had to sacrifice his minister of finance. He's had to sacrifice his DG SSS. These were people who were extremely close to the president, inner circle of the president. Now, as to selectiveness in the war against corruption, I mean, I don't have to explain more than 10 seconds. The only people that have been convicted in this administration, convicted and sent to prison, are PDP ex-governors, are PDP members who were ex-governors, members of PDP, members of the APC, members of the ruling party, who the ruling party did nothing to try to save. They did not cover up the cases. They did not withdraw the cases from court. They did not influence the cases from court. There is no PDP member that has been convicted. The president or the ruling party has not influenced the judiciary in any way to ensure that PDP members alone are convicted. It's only APC members that have been convicted. And I'm talking of Dariye that's in prison, Jolly Yami that's in prison. These are heavyweights that have been convicted under this government. So that is a non sequitur, really. It's not an issue. Nobody believes that narrative. The narrative was very on about a year ago. It was like a sing-song. But right now, that narrative is dead against this government. You talked about the rule of law. The rule of law, we have to take specific cases that need specific explanations. Now, as a senior advocate, I will not sit down here and sacrifice the rule of law for anything at all. Because I know that there is tomorrow outside speaking for the president. And I must be consistent throughout my life in defense of the rule of law and defense of the liberties of Nigerians. Incidentally, and I want to say this with all sense of modesty, and allow me the modesty to so do, that there is hardly any lawyer in Nigeria that has defended the rule of law, defended separatist groups, defended groups fighting for self-determination in court more than myself. I don't point one single lawyer that has done more cases in court in respect of this separatist group than myself. I don't see anyone. I've represented the MASOP. I've represented the Biafran Independent Movement in court. I've represented Asari Dokubo in court. I've represented the Oka brothers in court. I've represented all groups fighting for separatist groups in this country. And so I know more of these issues more than these people who are just mouthing it all over the place. Some of these cases that are quoted, like Asari Dokubo's case, are my cases. So let me affirm, first of all, that the rule of law, as a general concept, if above every other person, above the president, above everybody, is number one, the rule of law. However, I said this on this set before, this same station, that what the Supreme Court said is that a component of the rule of law, not the rule of law as a general concept, which is the liberty of Nigeria, liberty of citizens. The Supreme Court said in my case, and they told me to my face, obviously I'm sure the Supreme Court was very angry with me on that day. They said, Mr. Keyamo, you sitting down there, would you sit here and be talking in the Supreme Court if there's a breakdown of law and order? I said, no, sirs. They said so. Individual liberties must be suspended.
Well, Festus Keyamo SAN. Festus Keyamo, yeah, I get your point.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you are standing up as a true officer in the temple of justice, and that point is well made. But let's talk about the primaries going on right now, particularly within the All Progressives Congress. The report we seem to be getting from Lagos, from Delta, from Rivers, from Imo, from Zamfara is one of confusion. And it raises questions about the quality of internal democracy within your party. For example, who is the candidate in Lagos? Who is the candidate in Delta? What exactly is the situation in Imo? Who is the candidate in Rivers? A party that wants to provide quality leadership for Nigeria, that is looking for a second term, shouldn't look so divided. What do you think?
Well, I'll try and be very, very politically correct here. I am here as a spokesman to the president in his re-election bid. I would prefer you call the spokesman to the party to answer questions regarding the party. I will not answer questions regarding the party this morning as a whole, because I don't want to contradict what the NWC is doing. I'm not part of the NWC, and I may say things here that may contradict the position of the NWC. So I would prefer that you call the spokesman of the party to answer questions regarding the party this morning.
But as a lawyer and a public intellectual, you can on your own do an assessment, a non-partisan assessment of what has been happening in the last few days. And that's the context in which I'm asking you this question. What do you think will follow? Will the process strengthen the party or lead to further divisions? Let's do an intellectual assessment.
Unfortunately, I can't divide my roles here this morning. It's going to be a contradiction. I want to be the spokesman to the president here this morning. I don't want to split my roles here this morning and go to public advocacy. I want to strictly be the spokesman of the president in his election campaign this morning.
Okay, I respect that. But if you look at the situation in Osun and the conduct of the primaries so far and the role of INEC, many Nigerians are scared. Let me use that strong word.
Not the primaries. You are talking of the election, the Guba election, not the
Guba election.
You said the primaries.
In Osun. Yeah, but I'm also adding the primaries to it, yes, as part of the electoral process leading up to 2019.
Okay.
Many Nigerians are concerned on the basis of what they have seen that we seem to be moving backwards, and that INEC does not seem really prepared to be able to deliver a credible, free and fair election in 2019.
Well, you have to be specific, because these are the kind of things people say in public that confuse members of the public. They just repeat one thing. They repeat a lie 1,000 times, and at times it now sticks as the truth. You are a lawyer, and I'm happy you are a lawyer I'm talking with this morning. And so we need to have a conversation about the Guba election in Osun, which I'm prepared to talk about.
But you know,
when you say
but you
they
know,
are moving backwards, what do you mean? What do you mean?
You know, perception is important. In Osun, let's deal with the specific example.
Unfortunately, at the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court will not look at perception.
No, we are not talking to an audience of lawyers. We're talking to an audience of ordinary people who will make their own reasonable deductions. We're not in a courtroom. We're on television. In Osun, on September 22, an election took place that was adjudged free and fair, credible by observers, local and international. The supplementary election that followed was not so adjudged. There were, concerns, reservations, and all of that. The same INEC that conducted a praiseworthy election came back less than a week later and conducted another election in 7 polling booths that was the subject of derision. Now, on the basis of that alone, do you think that INEC is prepared? Do you think that we can trust INEC? Do you think that we can trust the statement made by President Buhari on October 1 that is committed to a free and fair, credible electoral process? I hope the question now makes sense.
Unfortunately, like I said, you will not. Unfortunately, like I said, I'm very keen on knowing what exactly are we talking about. Is it because a supplementary election held in the first place? What happened during the supplementary election? Was there disruption in the voters, in the polling stations where they came to snatch ballot boxes, where they came to write results, where the card readers did not work? What happened? Nobody's telling us anything. You just have wild comments going on everywhere. They said they barred some international observers from some foreign observers or whatever, some observers from coming in. And if you hear the other side of the story, they said certain PDP members were dressed as observers and were trying to invade polling stations, and they stopped them from doing so. And in any case, if they didn't allow observers in, people were there. Let us not put the magical word to observers. Let us not put magical word to the word magical meaning to the word observers. Look, doctor, in the modern world we live in, every single person is an observer in a polling station. Why? Because of cameras everywhere, except inside the polling booth where you have to thumbprint so that you don't know who you are voting for. People kept their cameras in all of those 7 polling stations. I have not seen one polling station, doctor, not one, where they were manipulating results, where they were beating up people in the station, in the polling station, not outside, where they were changing results, where they refused, to accredit anybody who was on the line to vote and all of that. Now, people said some incidents happened outside the polling stations. Take note. Outside the polling stations, that they were prevented from coming into the polling stations to vote. Who prevented them? Was it PDP that prevented APC? Was it APC that prevented PCP? Is that the fault of INEC? Because you talked about INEC now. Was it INEC that stood 20 meters away or 100 meters away to say you cannot come in to vote? So are you saying, when you say is INEC prepared? It is a question that baffles me, because was it INEC that was perpetuating all those illegalities that people were not allowed to come into those areas where they wanted to vote, or people were driven back? Was it PDP driving APC or APC driving PDP? Because even in these polling stations where PDP won, don't forget that PDP won in 1 or 2 polling stations. I've forgotten the name of them now. Even in the rerun, they said violence also took place there. So was it that PDP won because there was violence against APC members? Or the areas where APC won, was it that APC won because of violence against PDP members? These are facts that are not before us. So nobody can come here and dispute the results. I am sure you are not asking about the legality of having a rerun in the first place. Thank God you did not go there, because I'm sure as a lawyer you know that there's legality. If you look at, what's it called? The case of Kogi in the Supreme Court, you know that the Supreme Court actually gave legal backing to rerun elections in the circumstance that arose in Osun case. But we are talking about preventing voters. That is the main issue that happened in Osun during the rerun. And as a lawyer, as a senior advocate, I want to reduce the issue for determination. It's not wild talk. The issue was simply that certain persons wanted to go to the polling stations and they were stopped more than 200 meters away by certain thugs. That is the issue for determination. 1, how many people were stopped? Was it 10, 20, 5, 8, 15? Would those numbers they stopped, if they add it to the PDP votes, would it change the result of the election? That was a difference of 400 something votes. Would it change it?
Festus Keyamo SAN.
So this is the point we're making. Was INEC involved? Was INEC involved in preventing those people from coming in?
Festus Keyamo SAN. I want to ask you a last question, a final question, and I don't want you to feel like you're under cross-examination. Yes. Many Nigerians are in fact surprised, the same way they were surprised when, I played this role that you are playing now. And they say, look, we know Festus Keyamo as an opposition leader, a civil society activist. Why will you cross the lines and go to work in government and get involved in partisan politics? Are you doing this because you believe in President Buhari, or this is just another stop for you in your career line?
Well, I'm happy, on a lighter note, to answer that question first. I'm happy that they accuse you of the same thing. So you help me answer the question.
You are the one on the interview.
So I want you to address Nigerians. I want you to address Nigerians. Anyway, but on a serious note, on a serious note, the culmination of our entire struggles, and I'm sure you wrote so many beautiful things for many years, and your philosophy was very clear as, protecting the weak against the powerful, protecting the poor against the weak. That is your philosophy, which was my philosophy also for so many years. It's just that I took mine to the streets, I took mine to prison custody, I took mine to detentions, I took mine to criminal trials against me. You did not.
I've tasted detention too.
So many beautiful things about me in the past. Just a small one. You are, you know, and I'm happy you wrote so many beautiful things about me in the past, and for that I remain very grateful about the compliments you have paid me in the past. But however, we should understand and explain to the people of Nigeria that the culmination of all our struggles, the culmination of everything we do is to establish good government. It's not to just abuse government and oppose government indiscriminately. The end product of all we do is to say that we establish good government. And I'm sure I did not criticize you when you were government. I'd be telling people that they should leave Reuben Abati alone. He did what he believed in, and he did it to his best of his ability. Now, in my case also, the whole of what I have been struggling for, which is a president that is incorruptible, a president that has the best intentions for this country, despite the problems. We are not crusading for utopia. And I'm sure, Dr. Reuben, you are not crusading for utopia. We will not get utopia. We just only want to establish a government that has sincerity of purpose, that can confront the wheeler dealers, with a president that is honest, that has personal integrity. And that I find in the President Muhammadu Buhari. My late boss, Gani Fawehinmi, also found those qualities in him. So I'm a true son of my late boss. I'm a true follower of my late boss. I'm just following what he left for me and what he told me before he died, that this is the only man that he believes in Nigeria, the only man that he thinks can lead Nigeria. And that is what he told me as a human being. He told the world too in 2007. He did not tell me, he told the world the same thing about this president. And that is why I'm in this struggle. For me, doctor, let me make it clear. This for me is a crusade. It's not just being spokesman. This job for me is a crusade in line with what I've been doing before. I just want to ensure, and I want to say this on a lighter note, that your principal and people you served, they do not come back to government.
Well, thank you very much, Festus Keyamo. Great delight having this conversation with you this morning. I wish you and your principal the best of luck as you continue to engage Nigerians.